I'm Allison Posey. I am so thrilled to get to host our cast-free webinar today. I am just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, and we have Katie Novak in the house today, and DJ Swift is here. I want to thank our captioner, Anthony, for being here as well. But in our time together today, Katie is going to highlight what is new. She has UDL Now. Edition 3 that is out. I'm so happy to be holding this book right now. We'll find out how our book supports educators to not only get started with UDL, but to develop a really strong foundation to reach all learners, to reignite your passion for teaching, to return to your practice the same way Katie returned to a little blue book of hers, which we'll mention here in a moment. But you're going to love this book if you haven't already read it. She addresses so many frequently asked questions about UDL. She gets into standardized assessments, differentiated instruction, and it's written in a way that I can't put it down. So, and so much has changed since her first edition of UDL Now. So I know you don't want to hear from me, so I'm going to keep moving through just a couple introductory slides before the big reveal. But we want you to feel free to select the live transcript option. You can activate captions if you prefer to have that option. So again, thank you, Anthony. We also really want you all, as many of you have already started to contribute to the conversation. At any point, feel free to put your ideas in right now. I want to thank Mindy for being here on the back channel, for Nathan for being able to get our tech up and going. Please feel free to open the chat panel from the webinar controls, and you can choose everyone from the drop down where you type. You can add your questions in the chat, in the Q&A. Add those questions or ideas anytime during the discussion, whether you're participating now or if you're listening to our recording. Also, welcome to you. You can share through Twitter. So we have @cast_UDL, all caps. We have @Katie Novak UDL with a capital K, N, and then the UDL, and we have #UDL Now. So please feel free to participate at any point using those different options. And we have a digital handout for you all. In this digital handout, it has an outline of our discussion topics. It has get to know Katie's bio really well. And it also has a lot of information from Katie's website. She has amazing resources on her Novak Education website. And we have links to all of Katie's books and more. So please feel free to check out that digital handout at any point. If we talk about or mention any other links during this, we'll be sure to get those in that digital handout for you. And now, okay, I can't wait to introduce to you Katie Novak. She is an internationally renowned educational consultant, a practicing leader. I love that you are still so entrenched in the practice, Katie. She's a graduate instructor at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. She is author of 8, did I count it right? 8 books?
Okay. So it's like a double-digit birthday. So I'm at 10, and the only reason that's a big deal is like growing up, 10th birthdays were like, woo, double digits. And my friend Jessica Ronsley got a limo for her 10th birthday for double digits. So it is my limo book birthday. Even though this is number 1, we're also at number 10. So it has been a crazy, wonderful journey. And I deserve, a limo with some orange soda.
I was just wondering, I was going to ask if you've had that ride yet.
Not yet, but I might have to book one here.
Yes, I think so. And I think you have to head my way to the beach. Mm-hmm. Well, Katie also has 4 beautiful children. She inspires me. I'm so lucky to call her my friend. And Katie, thank you for being with us today. So great to have you here. Here it is, UDL Now, edition 3. Why this book? What inspired you to do version 3?
So, I was an English teacher, and I always said, the best writing is rewriting. It's kind of a cute thing that us English teachers say. And in this case, it was so true. So it was a really interesting journey going through the 3 versions, because when I started, I was a 7th grade teacher. And I wrote UDL Now version 1 through the lens of how I planned instruction for my students. And I really thought of UDL as a lesson planning template, something that I did in my classroom. And over the course of the next couple of years, I moved into administration, and suddenly I was struck with how it can be an amazing lens for thinking about barriers in systems and what are some of the structural barriers that are preventing all students from accessing first best instruction. So I was like, oh my gosh, I have to rewrite it because I just know more now about the systems work. And in every school in the entire world, and I'm sure some of you are here, there are teachers who are so committed to recognizing and dismantling barriers, but it happens in pockets. And so what you end up with is the luck of the draw on who you end up with a teacher. And we have to create systems that don't leave room for failure. So the big question for UDL version 2 was, how do we scale this? How do we elevate and celebrate the fact that it is being done in pockets, but every kid deserves to land in a class where this is happening? So years go by, and in those years, a couple of small things happened, like COVID and the nation's reckoning with, just the history of exclusion and racism. And there was so many things going on. And when I went back and read the second version, I was like uncomfortable with some of the things that I said. And, we talk about, Allison, in unlearning, that it's like, I used to think this, and now I think this. And, what I knew in 2014 was in UDL Now version 1. What I knew at the end of 16 was in 2. And then at the very beginning of the book, I made this little funny analogy to going back to find my childhood diary. This is it, everyone. Circa, I have dates on this. Okay, December 26th of 1988 was the first entry. So it must have been a little...
Let me get my bangs up.
Oh my gosh, a little gifty gift. And the best thing is it starts off so sweet and so innocent. And when I read back on 1988 Katie, I'm like, oh, sweetheart, that's adorable. And sometimes when I go back and I look at what I've written before, I kind of feel that love for the former me, like within, this area where it's like, I just didn't know all these other things yet. And so my first diary entry, everyone, hold on to the head, hold on to your seats. This is exciting stuff. Dear diary, today I get up at 8:26 a.m. and went downstairs. I colored and then roller skated. I had a friend over and we played horse and dog. Then I roller skated again. Then we went to bed. Busy day, huh? Right? So come on now. Like, if you have diaries that go way back, okay, Elizabeth knows that's a banner day. Double roller skating, and you go back and you go, that's all I'm talking about? Oh my gosh. And I go back into the early versions and I wasn't talking about equity and I wasn't talking about systems and I wasn't talking about, the power of professional learning communities because I just didn't know it yet. So sending love to my 1988 self, and it just really shows how incredibly fascinating and beautiful this work is, that we can continue to grow in our expertise and there is no ceiling.
I love it. And I just noticed that David Gordon has entered, and I know he wanted to say a quick hello as CAST Director of Professional Publishing. Hi, David.
Hello. Yes, and sorry, I had a few technical difficulties there, but I just wanted to acknowledge Katie and say that the way she just introduced the book was perfect, because we even thought about, should it be called version 3 or the third edition, because it is such a different book than edition 2, which in turn was such a different book from the first edition. And I just think this illustrates so well this concept, this UDL concept of the expert learner. Katie's always getting information about her books and how can they improve, and she's doing formative assessment on them. She's revising her ideas, and that kind of openness, that curiosity, and that willingness to say, yeah, I didn't quite have it right. I'm going to change it up and just put it out there in public again. I just so admire that. So thank you, Katie, and I'll step out of the way now and let you have a great webinar.
No, thank you for joining, David.
Yes, you have been there since the beginning. So I am so grateful for you.
And we often talk about this UDL journey, and there's a lot that also goes out. So you broke out your blue journal, and you're thinking about. One of my favorite questions to ask in these are some of the behind the scenes, like some of the things that maybe we don't actually see or get to read about in the book, but might have been really interesting behind the scenes. So, are there any moments or any scenes that didn't make it into the book that you can share with us here?
Not so much that didn't make it into the book, but I think one really funny story here is that a lot of people read the book, and I've gotten a number of messages about the dedication. So my business partner is my sister, and her name is Lindy, and I dedicated the book to Lindy, the most amazing sister to ever walk this sweet earth. And that started out as a joke. So the book had gone through copywriting, it had gone through page layout, we were at the very end, and David, who was just on, sent our team an email saying, like, I need your dedication. And Lindy replied with, oh, she told me her dedication was, to Lindy, the most amazing person ever to walk this sweet earth, like kind of ha ha ha. And so then I wrote to David and I was like, oh my gosh, that has to be it. That has to be the dedication, because we've always been very, very close, and I could not do any of this work without her. You have to find your people to like lift you up and support you in this work. And she's a part of my forever PLC. But the best behind the scenes here is, as I thought back to the diary, I scrambled up into the attic and found the diary. And then I was like, it's locked. But luckily, this is like a steel trap, and I still knew the combo. So I got in, and I had this memory of the sweetest sister to walk this sweet earth who stole my diary and was like a little snitch and telling my parents that I literally had a page writing down all the worst words I know. There she is now. Lindy, it's nice that you arrived for this story. So Lindy ends up going and stealing my diary in 1988, and she told my parents that I wrote bad words. And so I wrote a diary entry especially for her on 3/3 of 88, which reads, and I'm not going to use the really nasty language, Lindy, because I'm classier than that. And as Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high. But I said, my sister read you, bleep her. Love, Katie. So we have come full circle that the most amazing sister to walk the sweet earth has been forgiven for crimes against my literary career. Do you remember that, stealing it, Lindy? You're on the panel. Let's hear it.
100% I remember stealing that. I mean, there were some juicy things about the neighborhood boys in that.
I was wondering what you were looking for in there. If there was a story.
It was blue, like this tiny little blue thing. Oh, there it is. Yeah. I was about to describe the bears.
So that's the behind the scenes, is we continue to have a lot of fun together, and I have forgiven her for that very serious, egregious lapse in judgment in 1988.
And now we get to read. Thank you for sharing so much of your stories. I think you are a masterful storyteller. Storytelling got me into UDL through David Rose. You have continued to inspire me through your stories. And we were thinking about, third time's a charm. This is UDL Now, number 3. And so I think your idea to think about stories that come in threes was absolutely brilliant. And so what we thought we would do today was try to connect some ideas from Katie's edition number 3 to fairy tales that also have threes. So you all may think back to your childhood and some stories you may have heard. There are a surprising number of fairy tales that have threes in them. So in your short and sweet intro, you share 3 scenarios that readers may face when they're learning about UDL. So one scenario is that UDL takes too much time. And so if this resonates with you, we hope you enjoy our connection to the 3 little pigs. Scenario 2 that you share is that UDL may be required. You may have to implement UDL. And if this sounds like you, we hope you enjoy our connection to the story of the 3 billy goats, Gruff. And scenario 3 is that UDL just may not seem realistic for you and the variability of your students. So if this sounds like you, we hope you enjoy the connection to Goldilocks and the Three Bears. So those are going to be the 3 stories we connect to today. And if anyone has other ideas or other stories they want to share, please feel free to put them in the chat. So are you ready, Katie?
I am so ready. So when you reached out and you're like, we have to do something with third time's a charm, you know, immediately I was like, we have to do something with fairy tales. And the cool thing about fairy tales is they have these like lovely little morals at the end. And so we're going to like rework these fairy tales through the lens of universal design for learning. And after each one, we're going to pause. We're going to allow Swift to play some music, bring our energy up. And during that time, we want to give you some space to post on social media, to put your thoughts in the chat. If you have a diary where you're taking notes, you can just put it right in there. Or if you're lucky enough to watch this with your colleagues, you can have a conversation. So we're gonna have those chat alerts after each fairy tale. So let's start off, Allison, you can give kind of a short summary of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and then let's dive into how this connects to UDL.
So Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a British fairy tale. And this little girl, Goldilocks, comes upon a house and no one's home. And so she lets herself in, which is what you do, right? She starts tinkering around in the house. And there's some porridge, which is, I've actually never eaten porridge. It's sort of like oatmeal is something I've eaten. And she tries the first porridge that was on the table and she burns her mouth. It was just too hot. Then she tries the second bowl of porridge and it's like really cold. But the third porridge on the table was just right. So she ate it all up. And feeling a little full, she goes to sit down in the chairs in the house. And the first chair is really hard. And the second chair is too soft. And the third chair, she's like, woo, this is just right. And she rocks and rocks and she breaks it. She's exhausted from all this exploring these other people's homes. So she's tired. She wanders upstairs and she tries 3 different beds. One's too hard, one's too soft, and you might guess it, the third one was just right. And she falls asleep only to be awakened by the 3 bears who actually live in the house. And it was the little bear whose porridge she ate, whose chair she broke, and whose bed she was sleeping in. And she just runs away. So that's a little bit about Goldilocks and the 3 bears. So Katie, how on earth does this fairy tale filled with threes resonate for UDL Now version 3?
Okay, so when I wrote the first version of UDL Now, I talked about the importance of giving students options and choices, recognizing their variability. So, you know, we think about the 3 little bears story and it's like Papa Bear needs the big chair and Mama Bear needs the medium chair. And the little bear has this like really small, cute chair. And that is a great example of interpersonal variability, which is that there are differences between us, but there's also incredible differences within us. And that's intrapersonal variability. And so I think that sometimes when I was first teaching, I was really focused on students understanding their learning profile as though that was something that was static. And it would be like, figure out what chair works for you, and then you're gonna choose that chair every time. And one of the things that I absolutely learned over the course of my work in UDL was just how important it is to tie in that social emotional learning piece, which is being really self-aware of where you are in the moment, being really socially aware of the environment around you, and then making a responsible decision based on that. So it's moving away from this, well, this is my learning style, so this is what I have to choose, or I'm extroverted, so I'm gonna work with other people, but saying like, right now, what is my goal and where am I at, and what's the best thing for me to choose? Now, the other piece here is that sometimes I don't know what to choose. It's absolutely true. So as we're working with students who are still building their understanding of what it means to be an expert learner, we can't just say, I'm gonna give you 3 options for taking notes, let's go. And you're like, I don't know how to take notes in one way. I don't know what those 3-way means. And this is where it's important to do some no thank you bites. And so what I have done over time is, you know, you might not know what's gonna work best for you based on context, but I want you to know all of the different options that you have. So with note taking, let's all learn how to take Cornell notes. And there's going to be exemplars and scaffolding and time to collaborate. We're going to use them on open notes assessments and really reflect on, was that something that was worthwhile and beneficial for your learning? How could you do them digitally? When will they work on paper? Really getting people to understand what it is before determining whether or not that's something that would work for them. And you might do the same thing with a OneNote or teaching students about sketchnoting, and that has to come first. So Goldilocks knew what worked for her because she knew what didn't. Now, let's try to just put aside for a minute that she was like totally breaking and entering, and just imagine for a moment that it was about the classroom, and we have to create a space, whether we're working with adults, whether we're working virtually, higher ed, or preschool, by saying there is more than one way to do this, but think about yourself, think about the environment and the context, try them out, and then make the most responsible decision you can right now. Knowing that we will reflect on that decision and say, did that serve your learning? If it did, you might want to try it again in a similar context. If it didn't, worry not, we'll try something else. And that to me is the power of expert learning.
And can a young bear, for example, be able to be that self-reflective? Sometimes I will hear questions like, well, that sounds like something you could do in high school, but I'm an elementary school teacher. I don't know if my young kids can do that.
Well, let's take like 6-month-olds, for example, right, who are not generally in school yet. And we could say our goal is for you to enjoy fruit, and you can try the pears and you can try the plums and you can try the bananas, and like, which of those do you like best? And even like the youngest learners are able to begin to recognize that one thing works better than something else. Now, certainly developmentally, when they're young, it's very focused on preference, but it creates this foundation that over time, we can begin to think about what really is the goal and how do I set myself up in a way that I can absolutely slay that goal.
And there's not one that's easier or one that's like the secret right answer, the secret right way to do it.
And it often changes. So I'm very extroverted. Anyone who knows me knows that. But in certain contexts, I would absolutely choose to work by myself. If I'm exhausted, if it's content I don't know anything about and I want to build background information first, depending on what time it is, I might say, you know what? In this space, I really just need to work by myself. And if I have the option, then I'm going to choose that. And again, we have to recognize that it's not as simple as just know your learning preferences and then always go with those, because it will implode because our situations and contexts are always changing.
And it aligns with what we know about the learning brain, because the learning brain can change based on how it's interacting with the environment. So I get all excited about that. And what we would like to make sure that you all have a chance to do now is to reflect on a little bit about how this Goldilocks and the Three Bears is a little bit like expert learning.
And at this point too, everybody who's there is certainly share your thoughts, have a conversation, but also it's a great time to ask questions. I will keep my eye on the chat. And when this 2-minute timer is up, we can then dive in and answer some of those questions. Educators are just so incredibly brilliant and flexible with their thinking, because I love the one about she didn't take it personally that the first one didn't work. And I think that so many of our kids, and this is Carol Dweck's work, but they have this fixed mindset. It's like, well, I couldn't do it that way, so it must mean I can't do it. As opposed to, there's got to be another way to do this. I just have to keep looking. I just have to keep trying. So Allison, what stuck out to you in that response?
Well, it's so similar. The one that was sharing that she was a risk taker. Once she went into a home that wasn't even hers, but then she started trying things out. I love it.
Yeah, she made that her own. And so how do we help to create environments where people realize that it's not enough to give options and choices if you're not eliminating barriers. And it's not enough even to eliminate barriers if you are not going to give students opportunities to be more self-aware, to be more self-reflective, to kind of monitor their progress, to figure out what works best for them, knowing that it's always changing. And, I think that so many times we look at particular students and we say, that's what that kid needs. as if that kid's not going to change. And we're going to end up burying ourselves in being reactive if we don't recognize from the beginning that students are going to need different things every day, and we have to create a space that helps them to recognize how they can co-create a learning environment that works best for them.
Yes, and that really does, we often hear, we just needed the permission to do so. And we hope UDL gives you the permission to feel like you can do so and really empower those students. And I was thinking too, we learn so much just from asking you all. We can learn so much from just asking our students too. It's amazing. They always surprise me with what they share.
What I also loved about that is Leslie just put, like, she wanted something, and we have to build more agency in our learners to move away from this model of compliance. Like, students want to be successful. They just don't care enough about some of the things we do to want to be successful in that way. And how do we make learning more authentic and more meaningful so students want to figure out what works well for them because they want to be successful? And, you know, the term struggling learner always makes me laugh because every single person learns really well in some context. So, you know, the kids, oh, he's really struggling. And then the parents are like, oh, he is up until 3 a.m. trying to figure out video game codes, like an absolute pro. And it's like, he is not a struggling learner, is in this context, his needs aren't being met. And there's lots of different barriers as to why that happens. But we really want to make sure that when we're understanding variability, UDL is not some magic wand where thereby I provide these choices and now I eliminate inequities. That would be awesome and absolutely so unrealistic.
And what if Goldilocks went into the house and said, oh, I can only have this kind of porridge, and oh, I only get this kind of, it would be such it would be so different, and it wouldn't be as engaging. It wouldn't be nearly as fun or empowering. And I love that someone noted she even needed the nap to rest from all that thinking, and even being able to have those breaks when we need breaks from thinking so hard during the course of the day. Learning is really hard work.
Or it should be. It should be.
So our next fairy tale is an English fairy tale called The Three Little Pigs. And in this story, these three little pigs need to build a home. And one pig is like, yes, I'm just going to use straw because I want to get back to playing. There's a big bad wolf in the story, one of the versions of the story. And he huffs, he puffs, and he really quickly blows down the straw house, really quickly. The second little pig is dancing around and decides, you know what? I'm just going to use these sticks to build my house because I want to get back to my nap. But the big bad wolf comes and he huffs and he puffs and puffs down because I love that you actually, I was about to.
I just went for it. I went for it.
The third little pig, they mocked this third little pig because he took a long time to build the house, and he put forth effort. He drew up plans and he used bricks. And I even, as I was kind of thinking about this third little pig, he planned, UDL action and expression. He put forth effort and persistence, UDL engagement principle, and he built his background, UDL representation. I just can't even help but to have the three principles in my head. And the big bad wolf came along and he puffed and he puffed and he huffed and he puffed and he huffed and he could not blow down that house. So how does the story of the three little pigs connect to your version 3 of UDL?
Okay. So I talk a lot about systems, and I think that it's really important that we recognize that we have to build a foundation for this to scale in districts. And you can look at this in your classroom. If you are working with students, you have to build a foundation where students feel safe enough to explore the options, where they can take risks and monitor their progress and say, this didn't work for me, I have to start over, I have to take a step back, right? So it's all about how do we build this foundation within classrooms, this foundation within schools, and foundation within districts. And I think that too often I will go to districts who say, we want you to do like a 2-hour presentation on UDL, get everyone really pumped up, and then everyone's gonna do UDL. And I'm like, tell me more about that? Because here's why, right? Is if you don't have a system that is built with the intention of supporting all educators to support all students in inclusive and diverse classrooms, then this is what you end up with. You end up with a straw little house where someone goes, oh, I'm already doing UDL. Let me be clear that UDL is a framework for inclusive and equitable classrooms. And if you are a high school teacher, and in order to get in your class, you need to score an 89 the year before and get a parent contract and get 2 teacher recommendations, you have done everything in your power to exclude students. Do not talk to me about inclusive practices. Universal design is, how do we design something so any student could be included and they would have pathways or access points or entry points to move forward, completely predicting and knowing that you will have students who have really significant support needs, significant need for linguistic support because they're learning English as an additional language, students who need additional challenge and acceleration, right? We have this huge variability, which is like constantly moving. And too often we think of it as just, I'm going to give a choice board in that history honors class, and now I'm doing UDL, without actually doing the foundational work of saying, do we believe in equity and inclusion? Do we recognize that every single student deserves access to a grade level classroom with their peers, opportunities to work towards grade level instruction, teachers who have high expectations for their learning, and lastly, equitable feelings of belonging? And I can tell you that's not built in 2 hours. So that's about thinking differently about building mindset, about really thinking differently about building professional learning communities, professional development, and thinking about systems elements like having access to high quality curriculum, ensuring that we have technology, family and community engagement. And too often it's just trying to put it together real quick. And that will blow over every time because people go, it doesn't work. See, I told you UDL doesn't work. And it's like, do not tell me a house can't be built because you built something with straw. Okay, we have to go through the process of a true needs assessment, strategic thinking with all stakeholders. We are teaching people's babies. They deserve to have a voice. We are teaching people's babies. Those babies deserve to have a voice. And if we cannot do the strategic work necessary to build a system of equity and inclusion, then UDL is very, very misunderstood and thought to be, oh, well, I gave a choice and therefore I did it. I will huff, I will puff, and I will blow that house down, baby. So that is the second analogy.
I love it. And it really, I think one of the pieces that you emphasize more in this third edition than I remember in the first 2 is the importance of those PLCs. And I also really valued on page 127, in fact, I wrote it down. I liked it so much that you know your students better than anyone. So it really is UDL empowers the teachers to really work for the students and do that through those collaborative pieces, really build those different structures. And I'm glad, thank you, Mindy, for just noting the UDL playbook is a great companion to this because it really does address school and district leaders. So I think, I wouldn't say one book over the other, but they go together and complement so well to think about the system as a whole. Okay, so from there, here's your chat alert. What has been critical in building a foundation of UDL in your learning environment? So again, feel free to share ideas in the chat, jot down notes, have a conversation with a colleague, post to social media, and we'll give you a couple minutes to think about this connection to the 3 little pigs.
I love the question about what if the pigs had worked together? It's like trying to do all the straw house and then the stick house. Imagine if they all from the beginning were let's do this. Let's build the plan. Let's build the foundation. It would have been done quicker than everybody working independently with some people just putting in these straw houses.
And there was another really interesting one that I do just want to note, Katie addresses in her book about assessments, that it was actually the wolf huffing and puffing that was the assessor.
Yeah. The wolf is not unlike our standardized testing system.
And there's a great question that just says, does this mean we shouldn't have leveled classes in high school like CP and honors?
I think that that's honestly a question for many different districts to answer. I believe that there should always be access and opportunities for advanced coursework but sometimes advanced coursework is a totally different course. So like calculus is different from like an AB calculus as an example, right? And so I think that having all these advanced coursework is absolutely necessary. So I'm not advocating for a lack of advanced coursework in any way. It's just that every student should have opportunities to access that advanced coursework. And when we create a lot of kind of exclusionary barriers that you have to get through, then some students simply don't have the opportunity. Now, I did have the opportunity and chose not to take some advanced classes. And I really think that we have to have a much broader definition of success after we go to high school, because right now it's like, you know, the golden kind of temple is like, let's get them into college, and then only 30% of freshmen even finish their first year. So it's, you know, how many options and choices do we have that are legitimate pathways for students to have these beautiful, whole, successful lives? And I think that will help us to determine what the best coursework is for different students in different schools. But what I think the traditional system has done is it has separated students at so many levels. And when you do that, it doesn't embrace intrapersonal variability. And so I strongly advocate for a classroom that could meet the needs of the students who have the most, you know, advanced needs for acceleration while also supporting students, because what is necessary for some students may be a really great option for others. So like a great example is in a classroom where you say these students are really struggling and we put them together because they're reading below grade level. In many of those classrooms, teachers will provide options for audiobooks, ebooks, things like that. If you have a class where you say all of these students are already reading above grade level, I don't need to provide those options. What about the day the kids have the migraine or they forgot the book in the classroom, right? Intrapersonal variability means that what is necessary for some of our learners can be really, really good options for others depending on that context. And so, you know, the ideal system would be one where students could take a class together and get what they need. And it's not to say that there would not be advanced courses. It's just those advanced courses shouldn't be something that is not an option for many students. Now, if students and families and communities recognize the option and say that that is not a choice that's going to lead us to the place that we want to go, then that's absolutely a choice for families and students to be, you know, to make. But I think that too often the best of what our systems have available is not offered to everybody, and that is the real inequity. And it's because we start very, very early thinking that some have and some have not, and that is a really, really ineffective and inefficient mindset given what we know about intrapersonal variability. So I did not choose to take honors classes, and I did fine in my life. And I think that students need to be given that option with true consideration of what they want to do later.
And Katie, you mentioned in your book, you talk about the deficit mindset. And I worry often when you have these different leveled classes, the language that frames around it, this is my high level class, or I'm in the honors class, I'm in the low class, just the language that's used around those can be such a barrier to the actual learning and to the engagement, and can really kind of be a self-fulfilling prophecy, or a self-fulfilling mindset around that deficit model and that deficit way of thinking that can be really detrimental.
And another thing is too, is like, college is a great example. Is like, once you get into college, there's still incredible variability, but there's no honors classes. There's like honors thesis projects, right? So it's like, if you want to lean in to do this like more in-depth work, then that's amazing. But lack of access to advanced coursework, and especially lack of access to algebra, will close off many pathways later in life. And adults should not be making decisions for kids that prevent them from having the pathways they need to be successful.
So well said. So well said. So thank you all for those comments and those questions. And finally, we have a Norwegian fairy tale. Some of you may know the three billy goats, Gruff. I had to look this one up. I didn't remember this one. So the story goes that there were three billy goats who were grazing on a hillside, but they were in trouble because there was no grass left to eat. And they could see across the river, there was a green grassy area. But in order to get there, they had to cross a bridge, and there was a troll guarding the bridge, and he threatened to eat any goat that tried to cross the bridge. So they sent the littlest goat first, and the little goat's like, don't eat me because a bigger, more meaty troll is about to come. So the troll's like, okay, fine. The second troll does the same. He's like, hey, don't eat me. There's a bigger, more delicious goat coming next. And he's able to pass too. And when the third largest goat arrives, he defeats the troll, and then all the goats are able to cross the bridge and get to these delicious grass fields. So how the heck does this fairy tale connect to UDL Now version 3?
Okay, so the big thing here is the bridge, right? We need a bridge to get from one side to the other. And there are so many incredibly powerful frameworks right now under the umbrella of inclusive practice. Right? Like if you want to create a classroom where you can put the students with the most significant support needs and students who have, linguistic needs, who, are, we need to be trauma informed, we need to be culturally sustaining, like everything kind of comes together, you start looking at a number of different frameworks. Right? And so I work with a lot of districts that when I read their strategic plans, it's like, we're going to do PLCs, we're going to create a culture of database decision-making, we're going to do trauma-informed instruction, restorative practices, culturally sustaining pedagogy, right? Everyone's like nodding their heads right now, where it just feels like, oh my gosh, like how on earth do we connect these things? Because when you think about having to do all of those things as discrete skills, it's just like, just come and eat me, troll. Like at this point, it's all over, right? And so what I find is that UDL helps to build a bridge to get everybody kind of over to the side of being more equitable and being more inclusive by talking about what are the barriers. So for example, if we say, that group of students is reading below grade level, they cannot be in this, AP Lit class because they're not reading at grade level. Then it would be like, well, the barrier really is like that decoding. So could we provide options for audio? Or you could say, those students would absolutely love to take that advanced class. And the teacher is so willing to actually teach all students, but that's the same period that Learning Center is. And we have to give them Learning Center. And you shush. So yeah, Emerson is mad about that. He is like, absolutely don't let your schedule be a barrier. So when we think about this work, what I like to talk about with teachers is like, what are the barriers in your system and how can UDL help to build a bridge to connect one thing to the other? And I think that too often we just look at new things as not being connected to previous things. So last year we did trauma-informed instruction. This year we're working on restorative practices. It's like, no, those two things are connected. And they're connected because we have to recognize the barriers that some students will face if we do not do those things. And so when people say, where does UDL fit in? I say, honestly, it's like the bridge between everything is we need to create classrooms where every student could have access to. And what's really important is to recognize, I know that old school language talked about students in the margins, is people think of UDL predominantly as students who have support needs, but there are other students who will come into a class already knowing everything that's going to be taught. And that's a really significant barrier for learning and growth as well. And the traditional model was just like, let's just separate them. But there's still variability. And the more that we separate and segregate, the less students have opportunities to really get to know themselves as learners, because there's this misperception that now it's like a more like homogenous group. So I don't need to give them these options and choices because on paper, it looks like they're similar. None of us are similar. I'm not similar to myself yesterday or tomorrow, for goodness sake. So let's not start comparing kids. So I think the biggest thing here is just recognizing that when we talk about where does UDL fit in, please advocate in your districts. This is not a lesson planning template. This is a way to recognize that all of these other frameworks are meant to move us from a side of the bridge that is very, very exclusionary to get all students over to a classroom in a system where they have access to amazing teachers and teaching, access to technology and high quality curriculum and the tools, and the more, broaden the meaning of success is that you do have access to music and arts and world language and community partnerships. And to do that, we need one framework that helps us bring everything together. And I have found that saying that if there are barriers in the system, we're going to universally design the system and try to build a multi-tiered system of support. If there are barriers in the classroom, we're going to think about how do we eliminate those through design. But if I have one more person say, could you just show me a quick second grade science UDL plan? The answer is no, I can't, because it very much depends on what are your firm goals, what curriculum do you have available, how much of the environment did you already build for your students, what feedback are you getting from parents and colleagues in the community, what barriers exist, and then how do you eliminate them through design. And so when people say, I want an example of a UDL lesson, they fail to recognize that UDL is an approach to planning, which is a verb, which means I can't ski unless I put skis on my feet. I can keep asking you to give me little videos of people skiing, and that's a really great exemplar, but at some point I gotta slip the skis on and go down the hill. And everyone's like, we'll do it as soon as you can give me a lesson. But it's so incredibly integrated into the living organism of a learning environment that it's something that has to be built alongside the learners you serve. And if you do not serve diverse learners, you are going to be basically blinded by the possibilities of creating something that can truly work for everybody. Because even though we feel like we know the best practices, those practices are a way, they are not the way.
So well said. And with that, we would love to hear your thoughts on the connections between the Three Billy Goats Gruff. What framework would be valuable to bridge to UDL and your learning environment? And if the music is distracting, yes, feel free to just turn it off. But if you like it to help you think, leave it on. We'll see you back in 2 minutes.
Okay, so I have to speak to, this is a great story about how I came to do these chat alerts and the music. And it is because when we go back to like March of 2020, when all of us were suddenly thrust into the world of online learning, I did what a lot of webinars before me had. Oops. Hold on, Allison. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that in March of 2020, so that was really good comedic timing. So when we started, I did what I had experienced in webinars before, which was, a lot of conversations, a lot of talking, sharing slides and using closed captions was how I interpreted universally designed. We want to make sure this is accessible to people who can watch it live. Some people need the recording. We want to make sure people have copies of the materials. So, there's this additional link, right? And I started asking for feedback, saying, how could I make this better? And the first thread of feedback was, gosh, you talk fast and a lot, and I wish we had some time to pause. And it came up enough that it was a definite theme, and so I wanted to provide that option. So I would talk, and then I would stop, and then I would put on a chat alert like this. And then I have such a bad habit, I would just keep talking. And so it would be, look, there's kind of this opportunity of you to think, but you either can ignore me and miss something or you can think. So I smartened up and then I started just being quiet. So imagine if that 2-minute timer is on. Okay, Allison, do your best. I'm just spending 2 minutes in silence. Look.
Oh
my wow, gosh, that looks painful. Are you hurt?
It
what
very
happened
hard.
here, I literally started getting feedback that it was awkward. People started saying oh, bless your heart for providing these pauses, but it's kind of weird. And some people were really uncomfortable with the silence because it just felt anxious, are people looking at me? How long is this gonna be? So then I started putting in the timers. And then I finally, after a couple months, was I can put on music, because then people can always mute the music if it's distracting. We're all on our own computers, so we can put the volume up, put the volume down. So I started playing music on my own and started getting some really cool feedback, really great use of music. I love it. And then the feedback shifted. So at first it was, please give us some time. Please give us some time that's not so awkward. Then it was it would be awesome if you played ABBA at the next training. Could you play Whitney Houston? I'm oh my gosh, right? So at this point, I knew I was onto something. I wanted to provide the option for a pause with options for action and expression during the pause. I wanted people to have the option of silence but play music, but like it's very difficult to navigate the chat, the question and answer, the captions, the slides, and being a DJ. And then the universe would have it, I met DJ Swift. And we have been together now for almost 2 years. And it has been amazing because we can personalize the experience and every single presentation is different, which is really fun. So that is how we came to provide the option of music. And I should have been more transparent about if it's distracting, just click mute on your computer.
But you know what, Katie, I love that you just had that explanation because that is UDL. Had we just shown this slide, chat alert, 2 minutes, questions with a couple options, we could say there's UDL and there's a snapshot and you wouldn't quite get it. And maybe you would try to use it, but you wouldn't really know your goal and it wouldn't work and it would flop and that UDL thing doesn't work. But the thinking, that mindset that you just brought to how you approach this problem based on the feedback you were getting from your learners and how you were open to trying different things, but still had to be within what's reasonable with your technology, what's reasonable for your own cognitive load, is amazing. And that is UDL. And we started just saying, you know what Katie is so brilliant at is that's modeling UDL and modeling the journey and modeling learning. And so thank you for once again, modeling that for us. You're getting people saying, yes, this is UDL and yes, this is making sense for me. So I do just want to call that out. We only have a couple minutes left. And so I want to make sure that I do also want to recognize there was a great point in here. We just thought of 3 different fairy tales. We would love to hear your fairy tales and your connections and your stories, because I recognize my background and the fairy tales I'm familiar with are very different than the ones you all may have grown up with. So please share your ideas with us here. Oh, good. We're getting some right now in the chat because this is a conversation we do not want to end. And so we want to continue thinking about how we can make connections to the stories we know and love and grew up with and the power and promise of UDL. So I do want to take a moment, Katie, and just ask, what is an action that UDL Now version 3 is supporting or that you recommend that we take today?
I think that it's just a colleague I used to work with used to always say to me, what are you going to do Monday and what are you going to do someday? So someday we're going to build this big brick house, but like Monday, we have to start somewhere, right? And so what I think is really powerful is it always starts with a self-assessment, which is like, what is a barrier that right now you are facing? And looking at that barrier and saying, there is a way to design to minimize that. And I think that your next step is going to be really, really personalized, because it's like, what is a barrier that you are facing at this moment in time? And throughout the book, we give lots of different examples of places to start, but I think that we all have our own starting place. And, some of you are like ramping up for professional learning because it's summer, and some of you are turning off professional learning because it's summer, because each of us find like this renewal in our own ways. So for some of you, the next step is going to be, I want to read more. I want to take a course. I want to, put together a proposal for a conference. And some of you are like, the best thing for my mental health right now is to do nothing for 2 months. And I honor every single choice that you make because it's what's best for you.
Love it. Love it. We do want to invite you all to, we're not going to give you 2 minutes because we recognize we're at our time, but to commit to just jot down or share some actions that you'll take to continue your expert learning journey. It is a journey. Think of Katie's little blue journal that she found. It is a full journey. And know that we have resources for you in the digital handout, the bit.ly/UDL Now 3 cast webinar. It has links to Katie's website. That she on that website has courses, there's a book discussion guide, there are amazing blog articles, there are lessons that have been redesigned with UDL. There are so many rich resources there. So please find those in this digital handout. You also get a discount today. You can order UDL Now if it's available through publishing.cast.org, and you can save 20% with the code Novak3Web. And this is available through July 1st, 2022. So please use this, buy these books. It's a really great summer read. In fact, my kids were asking me about the book I was reading, and I was telling them. Also this summer is our 8th annual CAST UDL Symposium on Learner Voice. So It's live online July 27th to 29th. You can register today at the, thank you, Mindy, for continuing to put all these links in the chat at bit.ly/cast-symposium-2022. And someone asked, how can we find out about more UDL learning opportunities? Katie has a lot on her website, so definitely check out that bit.ly link. You can also sign up for the CAST newsletter and find out what's happening from CAST, both in research, workforce development, and in professional learning. So that's bit.ly/cast-newsletter. Katie, one of my favorite quotes from you, there are two, actually, I couldn't pick one. One is, I'm also keenly aware of how much I do not know. So I want to thank you for continuing to ask and have these conversations that are so important. And the second is, you say, the truth is we have been working too hard to not have better outcomes. And I just want to echo that. As we come to the end, the close of the school year here in the United States, I know a lot of teachers are saying, I'm tired. We work really hard, and we really hope that this is something, a tool that can help you in your work. So do you have any last words for us before we close out today?
So this year for some people has been like absolute hell, and I want to honor that. I think that, like, I'm always like, I tend towards really energetic and really enthusiastic, and I don't want to be tone deaf about the year that you've had. And I think that a really important part of social emotional learning is just recognizing how natural feelings like anger and sadness and disillusionment and demoralization are. And you know, when I'm talking about how do we meet the needs of all learners, I absolutely include teachers in that cohort of learners. That teachers are doing way too much on their own because they don't have the supportive systems, and that's a huge barrier to scaling this work. And I think that, you know, as we end this year, certainly there are things to look forward to as we move forward, but I also think that people need to really reflect and think about what didn't work for them this year, and to make sure that we create strategies to avoid that. As a daughter of two teachers, as a friend of many teachers, so many people have told me that this is the hardest year they've ever had in 20, 30 years. And so I think that, you know, yes, it is amazing to celebrate what's happening moving forward, but also to recognize that we can't sustain this. Something has to change for teachers as much as something has to change for kids. And the power of creating different systems hopefully will help everyone. So regardless of the year that you've had, we have all been in those hard places in education, sending lots of love, and take this summer to do what you need to do so you're ready for your next adventure.
Thank you. And let's keep sharing our stories. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you again to CAST Tech team and to our captioner and DJ Swift. Have a wonderful day.